like a cancer. It could be anywhere, absolutely anywhere. So what are the problems that it causes? The problems that it causes are difficulty in conception, dysmenorrhea, dyspareunia, dysuria, dyschezia, GUB, diffuse abdominal pain. And then we come to the theories. Can you see how many theories there are about why endometriosis is caused? I remember when I was a student long back, there was PIH or eclampsia, and we used to say that there are so many theories about why PIH happens, and that is because we don't know what actually causes it. So every day new learning is coming up. Long back, it used to be retrograde menstruation. Then it was metaplasia, hormones, oxidative stress, immune response, apoptosis suppression, genetics, stem cells, the whole lot. You think of it and it is enumerated as a cause. This is a little bit in detail about how it is being caused. So the first line that you see, it is the function of the tube. The tube takes the sperm on one side and takes the blastocyst onto the other side, pre-implantation embryo. And through this, there is retrograde menstruation, but some women will have activated macrophages, and there'll be endometriotic implants, there will be change in the peritoneal fluid, and there will be a lot of cellular inflammatory response. Along with this, there will be progesterone resistance, and there'll be a release of free radicals. Altogether, this increases the inflammatory response, and we have endometriosis. So there are epidemiological factors and molecular and cellular alterations. You will find this slide very busy and very boring. But the reason you have to really have a look at it is because all the drugs that we are going to be talking about are based on these factors. So what are the menstrual and reproductive factors? It's the parity, age at menarche, menstrual cycle, duration of flows. Constitutional factors are the family history, the BMI, the presence of freckles, nevi, personal habits increase with alcohol, diet has an inconsistent effect, smoking has no effect, and regular exercise decreases it. Molecular and cellular alterations, there is an altered steroid biosynthesis and receptor response, increased ER beta expression, increased aromatase expression, perturbations in progesterone signal intermediates. So there is increased invasiveness and vascularization of the endometrium. So there is upregulated MMP expression, increased peritoneal VEGF, overactive AKT, and recruitment of Tie2 expressing macrophages. Result is that there is more invasion, there is neovascularization, and there is an inflammatory response. So what is actually happening? Here you can see that all our tissues are normally in a balance. But here, the weight of the inflammatory signals, the aromatase activity goes on increasing, and the anti-inflammatory cytokines go on decreasing, and therefore this becomes weighted and endometriosis is seen. In endometriosis, there is a progesterone resistance. What happens in a healthy endometrium? There are beta receptors that are responsible for cell proliferation, decerebralization, apoptosis, anti-inflammatory effect, and anti-angiogenic effect. But when there is endometriosis, then A receptors become activated, and there is increased cell proliferation, impaired decerebralization, reduced apoptosis, reduced anti-inflammatory effect, and increased angiogenic effect. So these are the things that you are going to see in endometriosis. American Society for Reproductive Medicine says that endometriosis should be viewed as a chronic inflammatory disease, which is estrogen dependent and progesterone resistant. That requires a lifelong management plan with a goal of maximizing the use of medical treatment and avoiding repeated surgical procedures. Friends, I'm going to read this again because this is the crux of the whole matter. Being naive happy, operating over and over again is not going to solve the problems of a woman with endometriosis. It will ultimately have to be a medical treatment. So let us focus more on that. It is a chronic inflammatory disease. So obviously you are going to need anti-inflammatory agents. Estrogen dependent. So you're not going to give estrogen and progesterone resistant. So you might have to increase your progesterone doses with the goal of maximizing the use of medical treatment and avoid repeated surgical procedures. What are the treatment goals? To elevate pain and promote fertility, reduce the recurrence, and improve the quality of life of the patient. These are the goals that we have in a treatment. So these goals will change with the age of the patient. Elevate pain or fertility or recurrence or quality of life. So what are the factors that influence the choice of therapy? Age of the patient, the fertility of the patient, the symptoms that she has, the severity of disease and the severity of symptoms, any pre-treatment that she has received, what cost she can afford, what are the side effects of the treatment that we are going to give, what is the evidence for this treatment. So these are interplaying factors and all of them have to be taken into consideration when we are talking about what treatment to give, what drug to give, what duration we should be giving that drug. What is the treatment? We all know it could be surgical or medical. So the reason for giving surgical treatment is you remove the lesions and you remove the adhesions, because maybe there is a lot of fibrosis, and when there is a lot of fibrosis, it causes, maybe there's intestinal obstruction, there's a tubal blockage. So a lot of things need to be done to prevent the symptoms. There you would require surgical, but the backup would still remain the medical treatment to destroy or prevent the recurrence of lesions. So even if a person has had surgery, it would have to be followed up with medication. What is the concept of medical management? You need to suppress the estrogen, reduce retrograde spill, overcome progesterone resistance. There should be an anti-inflammatory effect, aromatase inhibition, anti-angiogenic effect, and immune modulation. So these all things are required of a medical drug. What are the treatments that are available? We have long-time oral pills, danazol, NSAIDs, GnRH agonists. These were drugs, even when I was a student, these were on. Then the later drugs, lanestrol, gestinone, norethistrone, MPA. What are the limitations of these treatments? The NSAIDs cause nausea, vomiting, and GIT irritation, sometimes drowsiness, headache, long-term use, liver, kidney damage. Combined oral contraceptives, nausea, weight gain, fluid retention, breakthrough bleeding, breast tenderness, decreased menstrual flow. Progestins, nausea, weight gain, fluid retention. I don't think I should be reading this out. We know all of this. GnRH, it has mainly central action and minimal peripheral action. It causes hypoestrogenism, so it causes a menopause-like syndrome. Danazol has hyperandrogenic side effects. Why does the treatment fail? The treatment fails because currently available treatment modalities reduce the estrogen production or inhibit estrogen receptors, but none includes additional targeted alteration of immune and inflammatory process. Ideal treatment should regress the disease and symptoms without recurrence and adverse effects. Isn't endometriosis an estrogen-dependent chronic inflammatory disease? So progestins instead of combined oral contraceptive should be the first line medical treatment for endometriosis. When previously the combined oral contraceptives were used, there was increased incidence of endometriosis, especially deep infiltrating endometriosis. The estrogen in the pills may stimulate disease progression. What is an ideal medical treatment for endometriosis? As it is a chronic disease, one should consider not only efficacy, but also long-term safety and tolerability of the treatment options. And I would also add cost. Because if somebody has to take a medicine for a long time, the cost is equally important. What is the rationale for using progestins in treatment of endometriosis? We've already said that it causes progestin resistance. Once you give progestins, there is a reduction of serum estrogen levels. There is an immunomodulatory effect, anti-inflammatory effect, destigmatization and atrophy of endometrial tissue, inhibition of matrix metalloproteinases, and an anti-angiogenic effect. All this will cause clearance of the endometriotic spots. Role of progestins in management of endometriosis. Clinicians are recommended to use progestogens as one of the options to reduce endometriosis associated pain. But now what we say is that neoprogestins such as Dinoges should be considered for the use as first line empirical medical treatment. So when we are using the term empirical, that means we've said before that 40 to 60% of dysmenorrhea is because of endometriosis. 25% infertility is endometriosis. Up to 60% pelvic pain is endometriosis. So we can start this as an empirical treatment without going in for a laparoscopy for a confirmed diagnosis, which is said to be the gold standard for diagnosis of endometriosis. So this is the only progestin that combines both properties of 19 norprogestins and progesterone derivatives. So it has some properties of a natural progesterone and some properties of it is a nortestosterone derivative. What it causes utopic, the effect on utopic or normal endometrium is it reduces the cell proliferation, improves cell differentiation, causes reduction in bleeding and reduces the uterine contractility. And in ectopic endometrium, it causes an anti-angiogenic effect, decreases VEGF, immunomodulatory effect, decreases tumor necrosis factor A, anti-inflammatory effect, decrease prostaglandins, pro-apoptotic effect, and increase p53 induction of apoptosis. End result is pain decreases, and the patient primarily comes to you for pain. Proportion of women reporting endometriosis related symptoms. So if you see this chart, the studies have been done with 2 and 4 milligram of Dinoges, and the results are almost similar. Personally, I have never used 4 milligram except as a starting, because when you start the drug, at times the patient gets breakthrough bleeding and is very irritated about it. So for the initial phase, yes, I have started with 4 milligram. But otherwise, continuation has always been with 2 milligram. And as you can see, the results are almost similar. When it was compared to a placebo in a study design, Dinoges 2 milligram per day orally demonstrated equivalent efficacy to depo-leuprolide acetate at standard dose in relieving the pain associated with endometriosis. although offering advantages in safety and tolerability. The people who are doing IVF and all, they use a lot of leuprolide for fibroids and for endometriosis short term. So they would be more familiar with the side effects. Dynogest does not cause any of those side effects that we normally see. When there is a maintenance therapy with Dynogest following a GnRH agonist, there is no significant difference in pain reduction. It is safe in adolescence. It is very safe in adolescence. It can be safely offered to adolescents, can be used for a period of beyond 5 years. There is immediate return of fertility. It is cost effective in comparison with GnRH analogs. And there is no reduction in BMD, no hot flashes, and good relief of pain. Then we come to the retroprogesterone or the dydrogesterone. It has an immunomodulatory effect by suppressing interleukin 1, 6, and 8. It increases the nitrous oxide production and has anti-inflammatory action. It can be given 10 milligram twice daily, day 5 to day 25. It does not cause any weight gain, no edema. The beauty is it only causes atrophy of ectopic endometrium, does not have an effect on the normal or utopic endometrium. It inhibits development of new implants, relieves pelvic pain, dysmenorrhea, and dyspareunia. So this is another drug that is safe. The first line is Dynogest, and then this is number 2. The third thing that is available to us is the LNG intrauterine system, or the Mirena as we know it. It releases 20 micron per 24 hours for 5 years. Continuous exposure leads to atrophy of the endometrium. Small amount of LNG is released into the peritoneal fluid that leads to local regression of peritoneal endometriosis as seen in reloc laparoscopy. 60% women get amenorrheic in 6 months. But please understand, 40% will not get amenorrheic and they are going to be on your head. Treatment with LNG IUS reduces the recurrence of pain and continuation rate is around 68%. So if you insert Mirena in 100 people, 32 will have it out or it will be expelled. If it is inserted at 12 months, there is less cyclical and non-cyclical pain. It is as effective as DMPA for 3 years. And the effect compared to GnRH agonist is comparable. Now, there was a time when there was a lot of danazol being used, and then it causes a lot of androgenic effect, dadi much aa jana, all that used to happen. And so it was stopped. Now, what is happening is it has come as a vaginal ring. It has 1500 to 2000 milligram of danazol, and it is very useful in deep infiltrating endometriosis, and pregnancy is possible with a danazol vaginal ring. So it has mostly a local effect at that dose. Intrauterine device releasing danazol are also coming up. 400 milligram of danazol in the IUD, inserted within 7 days of the last menstrual period, lasts for 6 months, reduces dysmenorrhea, dyspareunia, and pelvic pain. Then there is injectable progestins, the DMPA. The new subcutaneous formulation of 104 milligram in 0.65 ml offers a lower dose alternative to the intramuscular of 150 milligram in 1 ml. It has 30% lower dose than the intramuscular formulation. It is cost effective, but breakthrough bleeding is a problem. So what do you have? You have OCPs and danazol, GnRH analogs, again danazol, then continuous OCPs. So now we come to the GnRH antagonists. They suppress the HPO axis, decrease estrogen to threshold level. There have been many phase 1, 2, 3 trials with elagolix, aberralix, and cetrorelix. Cetrorelix here is very clearly available. It is good. It has a good tolerance and efficacy and no post-menstrual symptoms. 3 milligram of cetrorelix weekly once for 8 weeks gives pain relief and regression. Relook laparoscopy shows downstaging in up to 50% cases. No need for add-back therapy and hence better than GnRH agonist, and long-acting molecule Tegarlix is available recently. This is a newer one, Elagolix. It is FDA approved. The dose is 150 milligram per day or 200 milligram twice daily. Can be used up to 24 months, but the bone mineral density reduction occurs when higher dose and longer duration of treatment is given. Aromatase inhibitors are letrozole, acts at central, peripheral, and local sites, used as a second-line drug for endometriosis. The use is limited due to hot flushes. It has been studied with OCP, GnRH agonist, and progesterone. With GnRH agonist lowers the BMD but is effective for pain relief. So I don't think this would be a first line for any of us. Third generation AI like letrozole and anastrozole are potent in treatment of EAPP, not responding to hormone and GnRH analogs. If letrozole 2.5 and norethistron 5 milligram are given continuously for 6 months, they reduce the pain score. Then we have the selective estrogen receptor modulators, tamoxifen and raloxifene. Raloxifene is no more available. We have tamoxifen, but it has the risk of hot flushes and venous thromboembolism. Then you have selective progesterone receptor modulators. So they have a high degree of endometriosis selectivity, inhibits endometrial proliferation, suppresses PG production without estrogen deprivation, dose 5, 10, 25 milligram for 12 weeks, reduces dysmenorrhea even in minimal doses. Safety and tolerability is good, and no side effect is reported as yet. But the trial so far has not been for more than 12 weeks. And it is not freely available. Then the progesterone antagonist, mifepristone and onopristone. This modulates the progesterone receptors in ectopic and utopic endometrium. We have all used this. 25 milligram per day reduces pain, 50 milligram per day reduces size of lesions, but it has an anti-glucocorticoid property, and hypoadrenalism is a major side effect. Then the estrogen receptor ligand selectively binds to estrogen receptor and estrogen receptor beta. It has anti-inflammatory and anti-proliferative properties, does not prevent pregnancy. In rat models, there has been up to 70% regression, and it is still under clinical phase trial 2. Angiogenic inhibitors. We know this drug. Endometriotic implants grow in ectopic locations with new blood supply. So, dopamine agonist cabergoline in the dose of 0.5 milligram per week inhibits neoangiogenesis. The other ones are endostatins, Anginex, rapamycin, doxycycline, rosiglitazone, and thalidomide. But in thalidomide, there has been only one human study. So cabergoline is easily available for us, and it can be tried. This is another group, statins. There has been a single trial with atorvastatin 20 milligram per day for 6 months along with OCP. It has anti-inflammatory action and targets at growth and invasiveness of endometrial tissues. They have an immunomodulatory property, acts on oxidative stress, angiogenesis. So statins can be tried in a patient who is a little obese or who would also be having some lipid disturbances. Cabergoline acts by binding with VEGF receptors, has anti-angiogenic and neurogenic properties, and very effective in treatment of deep infiltrating endometriosis. Cabergoline treatment affects cell proliferation. A significant lower proliferation index is observed in cabergoline treated animals than in controls. It decreases angiogenic factors, increases anti-angiogenic factors, impairs neoangiogenesis. So the clear advantage is that other forms of therapies delay conception by their mechanism of action and usually don't give pain relief, while cabergoline, through its action on nerve fibers, decreases pain as well. These findings support the testing of dopamine agonists as novel therapeutic approach to peritoneal endometriosis in humans. Whether cabergoline is needed pre and post surgery in endometriosis patients. Cabergoline is used in early stages of the disease and in deep infiltrating endometriosis. It prevents progression of endometriosis and reduces high recurrence rates. May be used prior, during, or after surgical treatment, and it normalizes the menstrual cycle. This is another drug, rapamycin, which has an antifungal, immunosuppressant, and anti-angiogenic effect. Quinabolide is another one. TNF alpha blockers are there. Immunomodulators are there. Interferons are there. Then there is complementary treatment. When nothing works, you ask the patient, yoga, meditation, acupuncture, neuromodulators, anesthesia, behavioral therapy. But these are not essentially the primary treatment. They can just be add-ons. There is some Chinese herbal medicine for endometriosis, and we do not recommend that. So what are the new potential therapeutic strategies for endometriosis? We have some that are based on retinoic acid. The study provides evidence for the potential involvement of KIS-1 and KIS-1R system in the pathophysiology of endometriosis, at least in a subgroup of women with endometriosis. The important recent findings are in arcuate nucleus, there are neurons co-localized which comprise of 3 neuropeptides, namely kisspeptin, neurokinin B, and dynorphin, which are collectively known as KNDY neurons. They interact to influence the GnRH release, where KP stimulates, NKB modulates, and dynorphin inhibits the pulsatile GnRH release. Why this is important? The future direction. Recent work in neuroendocrinology, endocrinology, tumorigenesis, neurogenesis, and genomics will markedly change the approach used for current management. Treatment targeted to genes associated with endometriosis research remains a future hope. Genome-wide association studies have demonstrated various reproducible loci are associated with endometriosis, especially in moderate to severe disease. So it is a genetic disease. Women with APP showed decreased endometriosis associated pelvic pain, showed decreased gray matter volume in brain regions involved in pain perception. Women with chronic pelvic pain without endometriosis also showed decrease in the gray matter. But women who had endometriosis but no pelvic pain did not have the decrease in gray matter. So chronic pelvic pain, whether it is due to endometriosis or not, causes a decrease in the gray matter in the brain. Nerve fibers are present in the endometrium. The local nerve bundle density is statistically significantly higher in women with deep dyspareunia. So NGF has been shown to be a major neurotropic factor in endometriosis, and further research is required in this. Neurontin may be effective for endometriosis. Gabapentin, as we know, because there are larger nerve bundles, they are more irritable in endometriosis, gabapentin or neurontin may have an effect. The meta-analysis demonstrated directionally consistent genome-wide association of SNPs in 6 genetic loci with endometriosis across European ancestry populations in Australia, Belgium, Italy, UK, US, and Japanese. So Indians are not included, and we have a chance, if we could get a genetic lab to do our work for us to study our population. 5 of the 6 loci showed stronger effect size of association with stage 3 or 4 endometriosis. So therefore, treatment targeted to genes associated with endometriosis research remains a future hope. Phytotherapeutic agent, resveratrol, another new one. Then retinoids and inflammatory pathways. Activation of retinoid signaling in endometriosis tissues is predicted to have several salutary effects on the resident cells within these lesions. The consequence of this activity in peritoneal fluid macrophage, there is reduction in inflammatory and oxidative status of the peritoneal environment and increased clearance of ectopic endometrial cells. Means the inflammatory response is increased, is decreased, oxidative stress is reduced, but still the abnormal cells are removed. So retinoid supplementation might provide a new treatment. In conclusion, what I would say, endometriosis is a chronic inflammatory disease which needs supportive and continuous medical therapy. Routinely used drugs for medical management have a lot of side effects and interfere with fertility. Detailed study of the molecular aspect of endometriosis is an eye-opener for using newer molecules which are specific for treatment without much side effects. Medical management should replace surgical management prior to ART or the event of a recurrent endometriosis. The slides, some slides are courtesy Dr. Asha Rao, Endometriosis Committee Chairperson. This is me again asking you to vote for me. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Manoj. Thank you, Gurpreet, for this opportunity. Thank you, listeners, for listening in.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really a wonderful talk. And as we know, the endometriosis is such a painful for the patient, and it's our duty to treat them effectively so that they get relief. And I request all of you who have got the questions, please you can type the question on chat box and send it to me. So after the second talk, I will ask Dr. Asha Jain madam to answer your queries. Now our second talk is on fibroid, and our next speaker is Dr. Gurpreet Kaur. She is the secretary of Raipur Raipur Menopause Society, and she is director of Sori Multi-Speciality Hospital, Abhanpur. So I request Dr. Gurpreet Kaur Soni to kindly give her talk on fibroid. And I request everyone to please post your questions on chat box to me, and I'll ask the question to both the speakers. And after this talk, there's a quiz also, and there's some surprise for you. So please wait for that. And I request Dr. Gurpreet Kaur to please start her talk. And I again thank Dr. Asha Jain ma'am for such a wonderful talk and for preparing such a good talk in such a short time. And I request again all of you to kindly support Dr. Asha Jain ma'am to for her this thing to make her chairperson for Midlife Committee chairperson. Thank you so much. Dr. Gurpreet Kaur, please. Dr. Gurpreet?
Yes, am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Trying to share the screen. So, good evening, everybody. I hope I am on the screen.
Yeah.
So, after a very enlightening talk by Dr. Asha Jain ma'am, I'm presenting a very simple talk about fibroids and that too non-surgical management of fibroids. So, hope you all will enjoy. So, just a little bit about uterine fibroids. It is a benign tumor of muscular and fibrous tissue, typically developing in the wall of the uterus. And the incidence of fibroids is about 40% over the age of 40 years. and nearly 20 to 30% of the Indian women in reproductive group have fibroids. And at any given time, nearly 15 to 25 million Indian women are suffering from fibroid uterus. So this was about the incidence. That means the problem is the big problem. Fibroid is a big problem. And now coming to the classification of fibroids, everybody knows it's just a brushing up of the thing. Intramural fibroids consist of 75% of the fibroids. There are submucosal fibroids, pedunculated submucosal subserous fibroids, pedunculated subserous fibroids, cervical fibroids. And depending upon the location, I think I'll just read out. The submucous fibroids are immediately adjacent or protrude into the uterine cavity, and subserosal fibroids distorts the contour of the outer surface of the uterus. Intramural fibroids are entirely within the wall of the uterus, and the cervical fibroids are located in the cervix. So pedunculated, submucosal, and subserosal fibroids are attached to the uterus by the stalk. Now coming to the pathophysiology, which is very simple. Fibroid occurs when a single uterine smooth surface connective tissue, they start replicating until a cluster of cells forms a mass that is distinct from the normal muscular tissue. So factors that affect fibroids are genetically, it runs in the family. And coming to the hormonal factors, fibroid tissues has more estrogen and progesterone receptors than normal uterine tissue, and so are more sensitive to alteration of these two hormones during the menstrual cycle. Risk factors are simple: the early onset of menarche, late reproductive years, obesity, family history, and blacks are more affected than whites. Symptoms are also well known. Most common symptom is pelvic pain and menorrhagia. Some comes with dysmenorrhea and anemia due to menorrhagia, infertility, bowel and bladder and bowel pressure. A few words regarding infertility in fibroids. It occurs because it may interfere with the sperm and ovum transportation. An enlargement or deformity of the uterine cavity might have impact on implantation. And due to distortion of the cervix, it can cause infertility. Distortion and obstruction of the tubal ostia can also cause the same, and increased chances of miscarriages in the fibroid uterus and increased risk of obstetrical complications can occur. So now everybody knows it is a socio-economic burden, and it definitely impairs the health-related quality of life and productivity. So what are the current therapies of fibroids that can effectively treat fibroids? Definitely everybody knows the traditional treatment is surgical, and there are no medical therapy that can completely eliminate fibroids, but yes, alternative pharmacological treatments can definitely control the symptoms. So choice depends definitely on age or parity. Regarding infertility, if the patient needs childbearing, the treatment will be different. Extent and severity of the symptoms, size, number and location of the myomas, perimenopausal or menopausal age group, we treat the fibroids like that, and if there is risk of malignancy, the treatment will be different. So in short, symptomatic uterine fibroids can be treated by surgical, medical or other modalities. So other modalities include uterine artery embolization, magnetic resonance guided focused ultrasound. Surgical is very simple: myomectomy, hysterectomy, laparoscopically or open. And in minimal invasive surgeries like endometrial ablation or hysteroscopic removal of myoma. Main point is by medical treatment, these are hormonal and non-hormonal. So in hormonal, we have oral which can relieve the symptoms like ossipils, progesterone, NSAIDs, tranexamic acid, and other which can treat the etiology, that is GnRH analogs and selective progesterone receptor modulators. So coming to the surgical management, I just discussed the advantages and disadvantages of myomectomy. Basically, in myomectomy, uterus is preserved, fertility is definitely preserved, and symptoms usually improves. But disadvantage, fibroid might grow again, symptoms may not go away completely, and need for future surgeries there. Definitely, the patient has to deliver by C-section, and it is a major surgery. Coming to hysterectomy, definitely this is full and final treatment for the fibroids. Fibroids cannot grow back. There will be no more periods, so no more anemia. There will be no need of contraception, and patient satisfaction is very high. But definitely there is loss of fertility, loss of uterus, and it is a major surgery. Still, if you preserve ovaries and other complications can occur. So coming to uterine artery embolization, few words about this. This is a day care procedure. Can be done under sedation, small analgesia like paracetamol, local anesthesia. Some people might use morphine and metoclopramide along with that. So what happens in uterine artery embolization? It is done by Selzinger's technique, in which the catheter is introduced into the femoral artery, and hence femoral artery and then uterine artery is embolized. The vessels that provide the fibroids basically are embolized by the polyvinyl alcohol particles or gelatin sponge, which definitely decrease the preferential flow to the fibroid vessels and hence the decrease in the size of the fibroid. So efficacy of uterine artery embolization is the symptoms definitely improve in 80 to 95% of the cases, and fibroid volume is decreased by 30 to 48% of the cases, and hence the quality of life is improved, and it's definitely less stay in the hospital. But complications like allergic to drugs, thromboembolic phenomena, bleeding, infection or bruising of the site might occur, and definitely future complications like because uterine arteries embolize, IUGR, preterm labor or miscarriages might occur. This is a small chart showing uterine artery embolization, hysterectomy and myomectomy, the effects and how useful it is. So fibroid reduction in hysterectomy is definitely 100%, but in uterine artery embolization it is 43%, and hence re-intervention by 11% cases might occur. Definitely symptoms are relieved in 80 to 90% of the cases, and normal activities resumed in 7 to 8 days. And definitely fertility is retained in case of uterine artery embolization. Next human modality is magnetic resonance guided focused ultrasound for uterine fibroids. A few words about these. This is basically, it uses targeted ultrasound pulsation to heat up and destroy the fibroids, also known as focused ultrasound surgery, and it uses magnetic resonance guidance to accurately target the fibroids and spare the healthy tissues. And it is a non-invasive incisionless technique. So these are the pictures of MRGFUS. So how it is done? It is an outpatient procedure done in MRI scanning room. Procedure time, it may take several hours because it is a slow process, and it can be done under light sedation, and parts are prepared, catheterized, patient is catheterized, IV line is secured to inject the contrast, and for sedation, all metallic ornaments and jewelry are removed. Ultrasound gel is filled in the rectum, which moves the uterus and fibroids away from the bowel organ. A compression stocking before the sonication to prevent deep vein thrombosis is given. Definitely, pregnancy is a contraindication for this process because it might harm the developing fetus, so pregnancy test has to be done. And now the patient is positioned in prone position on a padded examination table with arms extended forward, head resting on the pillow, pelvis will rest on the gel pad to establish direct contact with the skin. A coil will be placed over the pelvis to aid imaging. Once the ultrasound transducer is positioned directly under the fibroid, the cable is moved into the core of the MRI scanner. Head, arms and shoulders will remain outside the machine. This is how it is done. So MRGFUS involves the repeated sonication under the imaging guidance, and MR images enable the radiologist to see the precise location of the fibroids and the location of the nearby structures to be avoided, such as bowel. While MRI monitors the targeted fibroid and surrounding structures, the ultrasound transducer focuses sound waves at a small area of the fibroid, raising its temperature high enough to destroy the fibroid cells without damaging other tissues. Each sonication lasts about 15 to 25 seconds, during which time radiologists monitor progress and review the temperature-sensitive images. Since each sonication treats a very small area, the process must be repeated until the fibroid is treated. So the procedure requires 50 or more sonications and takes several hours to complete, depending on the size and number of fibroids treated. Once the sonications are complete, an injection of contrast material so that the radiologist can study the MR images to make sure that fibroid has been destroyed. So this is how it is done. Because because of the heat, there are some after effects of the procedure. Feeling of warm, menstrual cramps, mild sedation. There might be redness on the abdominal skin burn, bleeding or bruising that resolves within a week or two. Irregular menstrual bleeding may occur for a few weeks after the procedure, and definitely patients can complain of pelvic pain. So how do we follow up? Follow up is done usually after 6 months of the procedure or earlier if needed to assess the size of the fibroids by MRI examination. So benefits, definitely there are many benefits like rapid improvement of the symptoms without an invasive surgery, and there is a brief recovery time when patient may allow return to the normal activities very soon. There are low risk of complications. Fertility is definitely restored. Does not involve exposure or to radiations like CT scan. The MRI gadolinium contrast material is less likely to cause an allergic reaction than an iodine-based contrast material used for X-ray and CT scan. So risk, there is definitely minimal risk if all the guidelines are followed, and strong magnetic field is not harmful until unless impacted medical devices to malfunction or cause some distortion of the images are there. There is definitely a rare complication like nephrogenic systemic fibrosis that might be related to gadolinium contrast. There might be allergic reaction, burns on the skin or lower abdomen with possible scar formation, a rare risk of bowel injury. Sometimes a temporary or permanent nerve damage can cause numbness, muscle weakness, and a sensory loss. Blood clots may occur as a result of the procedure. So limitation of focused ultrasound for the uterine fibroids are multiple abdominal scars you should not do for such type of women, and many fibroids or very large fibroids you should avoid doing this procedure, and definitely it requires an interventional radiologist. So just summarizing the limitations of the following treatments, like hysterectomy surgical morbidity is there, risk of long-term surgical complications, definitely complete loss of fertility is there. In myomectomy, fibroid recurrence can occur and potentially uterine rupture and pregnancy complications during delivery and pregnancy management. Uterine artery embolization, there is a fibroid recurrence, pain, possibility of severe complications like embolism, and there is a subsequent need of hysterectomy 20% of the cases, and definitely an interventional radiologist should be there, and potential ovarian failure or abnormal placentation due to uterine artery embolization can occur. MRGF is definitely a fancy treatment for fibroids, but it's high cost. It needs interventional radiologists, and there is no sufficient data that subsequent fertility and pregnancy are safe. So we should have a medical management of fibroids that might treat fibroids symptomatically in patients for postponing the surgeries. We are waiting for postponing the surgeries or waiting for the patient to improve, anemia to improve. So symptomatic, definitely no medical treatment can eliminate fibroids completely, but symptomatic treatment with NSAIDs, tranexamic acid, GnRH agonists and hormonal pills are definitely there. But there are limitations of these treatment also was discussed with by Dr. Asha Jain ma'am in details, but I'll just go through this. Treatment with antifibrinolytic may be used for treatment of menorrhagia and dysmenorrhea, but can increase the size of myomas, and its ingestion sometimes causes diarrhea and headache. GnRH agonist, everybody knows, can cause hot flushes, vaginal dryness, decreased libido, increase in bone mass loss, increased risk of osteoporosis, and definitely we cannot use it for long term. It's painful injection, low pump clearance, expensive, and with risk of recurrence after stopping GnRH and NRH and agonist is there. Androgens, definitely they causes acne, hirsutism, edema, and associated with liver toxicity, adverse effects on the lipid metabolism and weight gain. And people complain of musculoskeletal pain also. Other medications like hormonal pills of oral progesterone causes weight gain, acne, breakthrough bleeding, and can cause increase in the size of the myomas. Same with the injectable progesterone. Combined oral contraceptive pills can cause breakthrough bleeding, not safe for long-term use, and cause increase in size of the myoma. Aromatase inhibitors have hypoestrogenic side effects and insufficient evidence to support its use for fibroids. Now, what is the function of estrogen and progesterone in fibroids? Fibroids usually overexpress estrogen and progesterone receptors, causing increase in cell proliferation. And so, progesterone has dual effect on fibroid growth. This stimulates growth by upregulating the BCL2 and epidermal growth factors, and it downregulates the tumor necrosis alpha factor expression. This is the most important slide in this, understanding the selective progesterone receptor modulators mechanism of action. So progesterone causes increase in the expression of BCL, increase in the expression of epidermal growth factors, and decrease in the tumor necrosis alpha expression. So it inhibits apoptosis, increases angiogenesis, increases fibroid cell proliferation. So hence prove that progesterone definitely increases the size of the uterine fibroids. So progesterone receptor binding is 3 times higher in fibroids as compared to in normal myometrium. And estrogen receptor expression on the uterine cells are also inhibited by progesterone receptor pathway, as I'll be discussing it ahead. The role of progesterone in promoting the growth of fibroid has stimulated the interest in modulating the progesterone pathway. So selective progesterone receptor modulators are innovative treatment in uterine fibroid management. So how does it affect? It is a newer class of progesterone receptor ligand displaying tissue selective agonist, antagonist, and mixed activity on the target cell. Hence, the transcription activation is locked. So there is a new use of old tablet mifepristone, bringing hopes to the uterine fibroid patients. So it is also known as RU486, the low dose mifepristone. And it is selective progesterone receptor modulator, and it is first in its class and has anti-progesterone effect. So now we can understand how anti-progesterones will affect the shrinkage in the fibroid size. So mifepristone for the uterine fibroid has studied in worldwide in 25 clinical trials, including 13 Indian clinical trials, and has compared with the GnRH agonist. Its efficacy is equally compared. So we have two strengths, 10 milligram and 25 milligram, whose strength has been used in Indian clinical trials, and which said that there is a decrease in the size of the fibroid considerably. There is a decrease in the menorrhagia, decrease in the pain, decrease in the dysmenorrhea, and the urinary symptoms. So the target side of action of mifepristone is basically fibroids. I've already discussed this slide. So there will be anti-progesterone effects. So it will decrease the BCL2 expression, it will decrease the epidermal growth factors, and it will increase the factors expression. So finally, the apoptosis it induces apoptosis, it decreases the angiogenesis, and inhibits the cell proliferation, and hence it decreases the fibroid size and volume, and definitely the symptoms. Now, compared to the GnRH analog that only acts on the pituitary, the selective progesterone receptor modulator acts on fibroid, they act on endometrium, they act on the pituitary. So the GnRH agonists, they act on pituitary, inducing downregulation and desensitization of the GnRH receptor, producing a hypogonadotrophic state with consequent reduction in the estradiol and progesterone levels. And this selective progesterone receptor on fibroids, it reduces the size of the fibers as discussed. The direct effect on the endometrium, it stops the uterine bleeding, resulting in the benign or reversible changes in the endometrium, also called as progesterone receptor modulator associated endometrial changes. Those are completely benign and not the malignant changes, and it reverts back after the stopping of the treatment. And direct action is inducing the amenorrhea induced by inhibiting ovulation and maintaining mid-follicular phase levels of the estradiol. So there are many studies, and the conclusion of all these studies are that mifepristone effectively relieves the fibroid symptoms and decreases the size, thereby avoiding unnecessary surgery, especially in perimenopausal women. It was the conclusion in the AICOG 2016. In ASRM, the low dose mifepristone had a shrinkage effect on the fibroids, which has maintained for as long as the medication was used. In ASRM 2013, conclusion was done that it reduces the volume of the leiomyomas and the related symptoms. So these are the textbooks highlighting the low dose mifepristone used in the fibroids, and many journals have published their studies. Like in Cochrane review 2012, the author's conclusion was the mifepristone reduced heavy menstrual bleeding and improved fibroid specific quality of life. And in 2017, they concluded the short-term use of the selective progesterone receptor modulator definitely improved the quality of life, reduced the bleeding, and higher rates of amenorrhea was seen as compared with the placebo. And sperms may provide effective treatment for women with symptomatic fibroids. And the endometrial changes which were there was also benign and not related to the cancer and were not precancerous. So there are 6 studies showing 166 women with symptomatic fibroids were given 5 to 50 milligrams of mifepristone for 3 to 6 months. This study was published in the Obstetrics and Gynae journal, and the result was there was 27 to 49% volume decrease of the volume in the uterine size, and 26 to 74% size of the fibroids were decreased, and definitely the pressure symptoms, dysmenorrhea, menorrhagia were decreased, and rates of amenorrhea were ranging from 63 to 100%. There are many Indian clinical trials, and with the revolutionary treatment option to ease the uterine fibroids, there were tablet fibro is given for low dose and high dose groups were there. That means 10 milligram per day and 25 milligram per day was then given, and complete amenorrhea in 25 milligram group was seen, and infrequent period in 10 milligram was seen. 98% patients with 25 milligram had pressure symptoms relieved, and in 72% with the 10 milligram. And coming to the size of reduction of the size of the fibers, there was 29% reduction in 10 milligram and 39% reduction in the 25 milligram group. After 6 months, there was 25% reduction in the size of the fibers and 30% reduction in the 25 milligram. So 2019 study showed a patient treated with tablet mifepristone 25 milligrams were given for 3 months, and compared to the group 2 in which injection leuprolide acetate depot was given 3.75 milligram IM once a month for 3 months. So comparatively, a marked relief with a significant decrease in the visual analog pain score was seen in both the groups, and treatment with mifepristone 25 mg daily for 3 months significantly reduced the bleeding, uterine volume, and the myoma volume. So the clinical trials showing the comparison on both is showed that mifepristone is as effective as GnRH analog, is better tolerated by as compared with GnRH analog, lesser chance of recurrence once the treatment is stopped in the main mifepristone group, and mifepristone is more effective in decreasing the blood flow to the uterus than the GnRH. The pain score, dysmenorrhea, and menorrhagia, backache, urinary retention was decreased in a great amount before and after treatment as shown in the graph by tablet mifepristone. A very interesting case, a 48 was presented in Lucknow. This All India conference was a 48-year-old lady with heavy menstrual bleeding with severe anemia, like 5.3 grams of hemoglobin, with a uterine volume of 592 cc, with multiple fibroids, largest being 299 cc. A surgical risk was there due to ischemic heart disease and many valvular diseases in that woman. So treatment with mifepristone 25 milligram per day orally was given for 3 months, and the study proved that uterine volume reduced to 394 cc from 500 to 394. The volume of the largest fibroid reduced to 167, just half. Amenorrhea at the end of 3 months, and in the improvement of hemoglobin by 9.5 grams. So for patients who are in high risk, unwilling for surgery, tablet mifepristone can be considered as a safe alternative. There are ample number of studies showing and ample number of journals that definitely with tablet mifepristone 10 milligram or 25 milligram have decreased the menstrual flow, decreased the dysmenorrhea, and decreased the uterine volume. And as compared to GnRH agonists, there is 40% reduction in the uterine artery flow and the patient became amenorrheic in 42% cases. There was no endometrial hyperplasia shown, and there was less recurrence after the stopping of the fibroids. And like in GnRH agonist, the recurrence was 40%, in mifepristone it was only 17.8%. Coming to the safety of mifepristone in the control trial, mifepristone in dose up to 50 mg per day is reported safely and is tolerated by the patients with fibroids. There is no atypical hyperplasia noted in the patients with tablet mifepristone. Endometrial biopsies showed no pre-malignant changes, and there is, most importantly, there is no risk of bone mineral density decrease and osteoporosis, and there is no chances in elevation of the liver enzyme. So advantages of low dose mifepristone over other therapies, which is as effective as GnRH analog. There is no effect on BMD. There are lesser side effects, oral route of administration, and this corrects the anemia and gives some time to plan for the surgery. And once stopped, menses reverts back by 5 to 85 days and mean of 34 days. And there is lesser recurrence than GnRH analog, and definitely improves in the health-related quality of life. So what is the dosage? The dosage can be given from 10 to 25 mg once daily dose after the food, and should be started from 1st to 7th month of the 7th day of the menstrual cycle. And usually it should be given on the same time of the day, and treatment can be given from 3 to 6 months. And in the same group, there is one more drug called as uripristal acetate. A few words about those. Effective, and it is very effective, well tolerated, selective progesterone receptor modulator designed for the uterine fibroids. It reversibly, like mifepristone, reversibly blocks the progesterone receptor, but not the estrogen receptor. It has no affinity like mifepristone. It has no affinity for mineralocorticoid receptors. Action on fibroids, it acts only on the fibroid cells and not on the normal myomectin. So indication is usually about symptomatic fibroid uterus. We can use preoperatively to decrease the size or symptoms of the fibroids. Dosage is 1 tablet 5 mg to be started during first week of the menstruation continuously for 3 months, and break should be given for 1 month. So same type of it has same type of actions, anti-progesterone actions. I won't go into in detail. And because of those actions, it also decreases the fibroid size and volume, inhibits the ovulation, and induces the amenorrhea. Absolute or relative contraindication is pregnancy or breastfeeding, any cancers like uterine cancer, ovarian or breast cancer, any unknown causes of genital bleeding should be ruled out to rule out the endometrial CA, or hypersensitivity to the active substances. It should be given, uripristal acetate should be given in patients with conscious risk, patients using contraception or with renal impairment, hepatic impairment, asthma patients, or endometrial changes, or any other concomitant drug reaction can occur, and bleeding pattern should be studied. So common adverse effects of uripristal acetate is on CNS, that is a headache, ENT, that is nasopharyngitis, and it is one of the most irritating side effects of uripristal acetate, that is nasopharyngitis. Some hot flushes can occur. One good thing with uripristal acetate is after pregnancy also there is no growth of fibroids shown as shown in the MRI. So there is a nice guideline for heavy menstrual bleeding assessment and management, which shows that if the fibroid is less than 3 centimeters, we can use progesterone, IUCD, tranexamic acid, mefenamic acid, norepinephrine. If it is not resolved, then endometrial ablation can be used. For more than 3 centimeters fibroids and hemoglobin less than 10, uripristal acetate for 4 courses, total of 20 months can be used. Hemoglobin, if it is more than 12, consider uripristal acetate for total for 20 months. If it is not resolved, uterine artery embolization, GnRH agonist, or myomectomy can be done, and final treatment is definitely hysterectomy. Before myomectomy, both GnRH agonist and uripristal acetate can be used. Before uterine artery embolization, GnRH agonist must be stopped, but low dose mifepristone or uripristal acetate can be used safely. Just a word comparing mifepristone and uripristal acetate is to compare the both of them in groups with fibroid less than 3 or 3 to 5 centimeters. 40 patients were studied. 10 mg of uripriston and 25 mg of mifepristone. The outcomes was the reduction in fibroid and improvement in the symptoms, but the result was mifepristone caused greater reduction in the fibroid size in less than 3 centimeters subgroup and more than 40% reduction in the fibroid size. There was 30% reduction in the pain and 50% reduction in the menorrhagia. And conclusion is mifepristone was found more effective and cheaper than the selective progesterone receptor modulator than uripriston. The rate difference is just double. So to conclude, in patients with if we want to have a medical treatment, the selective progesterone receptor modulators are very good treatment option. It preserves the uterus, improves the fertility, quality of life, and prior to surgery we can use, and definitely in perimenopausal women who will attain menopause soon we can use this. But in women with relapse after myomectomy also we can use it. Like we have done myomectomy and it is suffering and patient doesn't want surgery, we can use it. And to control the symptoms, to decrease the fibroid size, and to change the course of operation from hysterectomy to myomectomy as we used to do for GnRH agonist. It is well tolerated with lesser side effects. A few words about my favorite topic, yoga. There are some yogas causing decrease in the size of the fibroid uterus. There are breathing exercises, relaxing needle pose, Bharadwaj twist, reward head to knee pose, and supported bridge pose. These pranayams can definitely decrease the hormonal changes and which is very bad for fibroids and has other good effects like it improves the blood circulation and digestive system improvement and strengthens the immune system, good mental health, and detoxify estrogen levels naturally. The reclining hero pose, this is the pose, and it helps to reduce the discomfort feelings, and this pose reduces the size of the uterine fibroids also. Other benefits, it helps to release the menstrual pain, strengthens the thigh, and good way to reduce insomnia. Reward head to knee pose is definitely a difficult pose, but still this pose stretches the spine, improves digestion, and helps to improve the open the hips, and definitely improves the digestive system, release anxiety, fatigue, headache, and more. Bharadwaj twist. This pose also opens up the abdominal area and releases the discomforts associated with the fibroids. This is also effective in endometriosis and enhanced metabolic system and good way to throw waste out of our body. Supported bridge pose is very easy pose, and Setubadha Asana also helps to open up the and soften the abdominal tissue. Other benefits are it reduces headache, backache, improves circulation, heals the prolapsed uterus, and controls the menstrual pain. There are some diets which increases the estrogen level in fibroids that can decrease the estrogen level and help decrease in size of the fibroids. Those are eggs, gluten-free grains like millets, garlic, lentils and legumes, green vegetables like broccoli, spinach, fat or oils and nuts of the definitely nuts like badam and akhroot can be used. Beta carotenes rich diet like carrots, and iron rich diets will improve the anemia. So in picture you can use all these things to decrease the fibroid size. Diets to be avoided in fibroids are excessive intake of alcohol, excessive intake of coffee, excessive intake of red meat and ham, and foods should be avoided in plastic. Storage of foods in the plastic containers should be avoided. So thank you for your patience hearing. I hope you all enjoyed. Any questions you can ask.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Gurpreet, for such a wonderful talk. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gurpreet, for such a wonderful talk. And it all depends upon the size of fibroid, the location of the fibroid, the age of the patient. So it is said that the fibroid, if the fibroid is like less than 5 centimeters, then it should be managed medically. And if it's a subserosal fibroid, then there's no need of surgeries and things like that. But like I've seen, even if there's a fibroid is subserosal or serosal, or even if the fibroid is less than 4 centimeters, And in cases of the infertile patients, we have done the myomectomy, then results have improved. Though there's no fixed paper on this which says that the myomectomy will increase the pregnancy rate, but practically we have seen that myomectomy has increased the pregnancy rate, even if the fibroid is away from the uterine cavity, the size is small, and it is, even if it's subserosal. But still, as the guidelines say, we have to stick to the guidelines, and we have to see while deciding whether we should manage conservatively or we should do the surgical intervention. So we have to see whether how far it's from the cavity, and it's subserosal or its size also.
Yes.
And if the patient is in reproductive age and she is desirous of pregnancy, then obviously we can try for surgical. And it also depends upon the condition of the patient, the age of the patient. So if she is unable to, we see this, if she is unable to undergo surgery and just certain comorbid conditions, and then obviously medical management is this thing. So thank you so much, Dr. Gurpreet, and I request all of you to send me the questions. And there's one message from Marina. Marina is the, I don't know what her name is. So she's saying yoga pose, very nice information. So obviously Dr. Gurpreet is the speaker. So we were expecting something on yoga and diet. So there has to be something on yoga and khana pina. So she has already told us what to eat and what not to eat. And I'll request the organizers to set the screen so that I can be visible. Yeah. And now.
Stop sharing the screen, then you will be visible, I think.
Pardon?
I think I'll have to stop sharing the screen and then you'll be
yeah. You stop sharing the screen. Yeah. So that now I will share the screen and you will see the questions. There is a quiz and you have to reply. I'll tell you how you have to reply the quiz. You type all the answers. Like there are 10 questions. You write the answer of 10 questions and click the enter button, because we don't want others to see it. So you don't have to type one answers. You have to, at a one go, you have to you have to type all the answers, true, false, and whatever this thing is, and then you have to click. So you can post on common group also, but it has to be on a one single go. Okay, so I'll screen. Yeah, so can you see my screen? Can you see this? Okay, so this is the first set of questions. Medical therapy is effective in all types of fibroid. True or false? You have to write T or F, whatever you feel like. Tab mifepristone causes liver toxicity. Again, true or false? Then tab mifepristone causes benign changes in endometrium, which is reversible. Again, you have to write true or false. Then fourth is studies show. You don't send them answers now. Send after second slide. Studies show no significant growth in fibroid after stopping medical treatment with mifepristone. True or false? How long can be medical management with mifepristone prescribed? A, B, C, D. A is 1 to 2 months, B is 3 to 6 months, C is 1 year, D is 15 days. So I am changing the slide now. First question, Steph, Dynogest therapy decreases. Sorry. Yeah. TAP Dynogest therapy decreases bone mineral density BMD. True or false? Second is TAP Dynogest can be continued during pregnancy. True or false? Eighth is common side adverse effect with Dynogest are except headache, breast discomfort, including breast incontinence and breast pain. D is blurring of vision. And 9 is all are contraindications for Dynogest therapy except there are 5 options. I will again show the slide A. First slide I'll show you, and then there's second slide. Okay. Now I'll stop the screen share and wait for the answers. Ritu has raised the this thing hand, but you have to reply. I'm not getting any answers. No answers till now. No answers here. There will be a special video also. So I'll show you that video also till you get your answers correct.
ओरे पिया ओरे पिया ओरे पिया ओरे पिया ओरे पिया ओरे पिया उड़ने लगा क्यों मलबा बुला रे आया कहाँ से ये हौसला रे ओरे पिया ताना बाना ताना बाना बुनती हवा बुनती हवा मुझे भी तो आए नहीं बात यहाँ साजिश में शामिल सारा जहाँ है हर दलवे की ये दिलफिदा है पूरे पिया पूरे पिया पूरे पिया पूरे पिया ओरे पिया ओरे पिया ओरे पिया ओरे पिया ओरे पिया ओरे पिया
So congratulations to all the winners. Second runner is Dr. Preeti Agrawal, Dr. Rashmi Vats. First runner is Dr. Preeti Singh and Dr. Cheta Ramnani. And the winner is Dr. Yashashvi Pandey. Am I audible? Just a bit. Am I audible? Am I audible? Am I audible? Okay, because I'm listening, hearing the voice of that song. So I'm waiting for the answers. I'm still not got the answers. Do you want me to again? Okay, okay. I got the. No, I didn't get them. Yeah, I got the answers. Okay, great. Arpana Verma, she has answered true, false. No, that is wrong. Then Dr. Ritu, true, false, true. Then she has answered three, which is wrong. Then I'll go to Yashasvi. No, Yashasvi, hard luck now. And then we've got Mugda, true, false, true, false. Again, fourth one is wrong. No answers are right. Gurpreet, can you come up? Gurpreet, can you say something? Can't hear you. Hello. Okay. Huh. Yeah. आशा जैन मैम को भी मैंने अनम्यूट कर रहा हूँ मैं, so she can say something and stop, screen sharing is stopped. Okay. 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 Yes. Yeah. Dr. Gurpreet?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So,
So we can once again, we can put the slides, and then if anybody wants to answer, can answer.
pardon?
So we can again put the quiz slides for just for 30 seconds. If
Yeah.
somebody wants.
Yeah, I did it, but no, I'm not getting the right answers. There are still a lot of participants there, but okay, I'll again share the slide.
Okay.
Can
So
you see
what
the
we can do is,
Can you
they
see
would-
the slide? Can you see the slides?
yes, sir.
Okay, this is first slide.
Can you put it in the slideshow?
Yeah. Is it okay?
Yes, sir. And now we'll wait for 1 minute.
Or they
For
can,
the-
if they are unable to do it, then maybe they can do in a RMS academic group.
Yes, they can do that.
Someone is trying to write the answers on the screen.
Yes, yes.
So I'll change the slide.
It's better to change. And we can put them in RMS again.
Okay, I'll stop the sharing now.
Answer.
Now,
But
please.
eligible for prize will be whoever have signed in.
Yeah. One thing you can do is you can WhatsApp on the RMS academic group. That will be better. Okay,
Yes,
and you will get the prize. Dr. Gurpreet will announce what prize you will be getting because she is sponsoring the prize. So,
So,
Dr. Gurpreet,
we have decided 5 best prizes, and that will comprise of protective protection PPE kit and sterilizers and gloves. That will be sponsored by Acumentis company, and we really want to thank them for their efforts to do all these things for us.
so thank you all. It was our first effort, first endeavor, and it went off very well. So thank you so much, Acumentis, for all your efforts. And thanks to Dr. Gurpreet for all the efforts. Thanks to our faculty, Dr. Asha Jain ma'am, who has left just now. And we had a great attendance today. It was feeling like a CME, which we regularly do. More than 65 participants were there. So we are really motivated now. So hope in future also we'll do many more such webinars.
Definitely.
Chalo. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We'll log off. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.